What is up, everyone? Welcome back to the FanDuel page. We are live here on Blaiden Kirk. Today we're going to be doing a mock draft. Not my first mock draft of the draft cycle, but definitely my first one live. And definitely my first one live here on the FanDuel page. We're going to be doing things how I would do them. There's a lot of projection of where Jaden Daniels could go. There's a lot of projection on, how the receivers are going to fall. I'm going to say if I were the GM of this team, this is what I would do. What was uncalled? Corn review. That's wrong. It's not me. I'm not the corn guy. I'm not the corn guy. All right? But, yeah, we're going to do a mock draft. The way I'm doing this, again, is based on how I would do things if I were the GM of this team. And starting off first on the clock, we've got the Chicago Bears. If you're joining on TikTok, make sure you head on over to the FanDuel YouTube or FanDuel Twitch to watch this mock draft live, or you could just stay in here and hear me talk. That's also an option. So first up, Chicago's on the clock. This has been discussed for a while, but I think pretty obviously they should and they will take Caleb Williams. Number 2 overall. Again, pretty obvious to me. Bears trade back? No. Who's their quarterback right now? I don't even know who their quarterback is. This is a legit question. I'm gonna have to pull up their lineup. Unironically, I cannot envision PFF Bears lineup. Or I guess I could have gone to their depth chart too, but it's usually easier to sift through the lineups as opposed to Brett Ripien. Nah, see, that's crazy. Anyway, Washington on the clock at number 2. They should, and I think they will, take Drake May. There's a lot of smoke around Jaden Daniels. I think it's still May. And that's what I would do there as well. There is some talk about the Patriots trading back here, or they could take Daniels, but I've seen lots of discussion about them being open to trading this pick, that they could trade back. Blaiden, I'm a Cowboys fan. How do you get used to being a fan of a poverty team? Man, ban him. Anyway, there's a lot of talk about the Patriots potentially trading back, and they've even said that they're more than willing to shop and trade that pick. But I think the smart thing to do is, you look at this team. They don't really have, they don't have a quarterback. They don't have any weapons. And we were talking about this on an episode of Stay Hot. It's what would their plan be? So you trade back to, the teams that really need quarterbacks are in the early teens. Let's say you trade back to 11 with Minnesota, right? And they go up to get Daniels. Well, then what's your plan? Because you're going to be stuck down the board with no quarterback and no receivers. And I know there's weapons later in the draft, but you're going to lose out on Marv. You're going to lose out on Rome. You're going to lose out on Neighbors. You might lose out on Bowers. He could be there. And maybe if you're really, really enamored with Bowers and you think he would fall to you at 11, then I guess that makes sense. But to me, the smart thing is just to take the best player. And the best player on my board, number 1 overall player, is Marvin Harrison Jr. So at 3, not only is he the best player available, but he's also amazing value. Because in any other draft, in a draft where you don't have a Caleb Williams and a Drake May, I think Marvin could go number 1 overall. Drake May will be a commander. I agree. Strongly agree. What do you think? Where do I think you'll get drafted? Your intramural career was pretty solid. I'm thinking back half of the first round, somewhere in there. You fell off towards the end. I don't think teams are going to like that too much. You're praying Marvin doesn't go to the Cardinals. They need a receiver too. I like my whole philosophy, and I'm just gonna kind of spill how I would do this, like wholeheartedly, is I would absolutely just go receiver, receiver, receiver here. And that makes the Giants pick really difficult, but you can't pick like that. I'm picking from the perspective of if I'm the Patriots here, Vikings call, and I guess if they offered like pick 23 and 11, I might take it because then you'd have 11, 23, and 34, and you would probably get some really good players out of that. But anything less than that, I would not feel very comfortable with. But 11 and 20, if the Vikings offered 11 and 23 to move up and get Daniels, I would take that if I were the Patriots. The problem with the way I'm doing this mock draft, though, is that if I were the Vikings, I would rather just have picks 11 and 23. Oh, I've seen KJ Franklin's RAS score. Do not worry, man. I've seen it. So yeah, the way I would do it, if I were the Patriots here, sitting at number 3, if someone came to me with a good offer, yes, I would take it. But there is no team where I would really want to trade up, unless I were trading up for Marvin Harrison. But like, I wouldn't trade up for Drake or for Jaden Daniels. I wouldn't. If Drake May were here, right? If I really wanted Jaden Daniels here at 2 for Washington, and Drake May were here at 3, first of all, if I were the Patriots, I would just still pick Drake May. But then, like, I would be very inclined to say, oh, if I were in Minnesota, I would offer 11 and 23. And then at that point, if you're the Patriots, I think you really have to consider it. That's a tough decision. But I think here, it's easy because if I were the Vikings, I would not trade up, even though if I were the Patriots, I would take that trade. So I'm taking Marvin at 3. My next best receiver on the board is Rome Odunze, and I think that's what the Cardinals need most here. Though the Cardinals just announced that they are definitely shopping their pick as well, and they would be willing to trade back. The problem with them is that they said they wouldn't end up pulling the trigger on that until draft night. So now the question is, because if you just went receiver, 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 there's a few teams out of like the Giants, the Giants, the Chargers. It's like if you're really worried about losing your guy here, you might think about trading up. You really might. It's a tough one, man. Again, I'm not trading up if I'm Minnesota because, like, even though, like, you might need a quarterback, I think you are the least desperate for one. And I think they're the best landing spot for a quarterback. So as much as you might be like, oh, imagine if they got Daniels, I'm like, yeah, but think about the assets you have to give up to get him. I would rather sit, and if Penix was there at 23 and you really wanted Penix, I would rather you do that than reach, in my opinion, on Daniels or McCarthy. And I'll even say this: if Daniels is there at 11, which I think he could be, I would just pick him there. The only way he wouldn't be is if, like, the Broncos or the Raiders traded up, which if I were the Raiders, I might consider it. I might. It's just a matter of, like, where do you go? The Raiders are really the team where I'm like, man, they've got no answer at quarterback right now. And even the Broncos, I feel like, if I'm not mistaken, I feel like the Broncos probably don't have much of an answer either. I mean, they did just trade for Zach Wilson, but, like, let's be so serious. I'm sure if Arizona gets a good offer, like between Arizona, New England, and the Chargers, I'm sure the Vikings are calling those teams and being like, hey, can we get up there? And I'm willing to bet I'm willing to bet that they're thinking about it. My thing is, like, if I were in Minnesota, I wouldn't do that. Right. Like, again, I'm just like not super concerned about it because I think you have an ideal situation to kind of drop a quarterback into. And I don't love Daniels or McCarthy enough to justify moving up that high for one of those guys. The only team where I could see where I'm like, I might have to take that risk is the Raiders, because the Vikings and the Broncos are ahead of you. And maybe that's your concern if you're Minnesota. But again, I think you are in more of an ideal situation. But I guess you could say the same thing for the Raiders. I mean, they have Devontae Adams. They have Jacoby Myers. They have Colton Miller on their offensive line. It wouldn't be the worst situation in the world. But I don't know, man. That's it. It's definitely something that you have to consider, but I don't know if you have to force it. I really don't. I think the Raiders might have. The Raiders, I feel like, are in the biggest position, though, to where you have to take a guy because who is their quarterback? Aiden O'Connell, right? So you either deal with Aiden O'Connell if you're the Raiders, or you move up. I'm at pick 4. I'm at pick 4 because what I'm trying to consider is, like, do I want to have the Raiders trade up? Because they're the only team where I feel like you are desperate enough to move up because your quarterback situation is truly so horrible. The Broncos might also be, but I feel like the Vikings just aren't desperate enough. Like, I would be okay if I were in the Vikings' shoes. The Raiders is where I would really start considering it. Because I at some point they've got to start winning. And I think the Broncos trade up or get... I'm not going to sit here and say if I know what they're going to do. The Raiders have Minshew. Do they have Minshew? Am I tripping? They do have Gardner Minshew. So they might not be so desperate either. So yeah, I don't know if there's a team. So the quarterbacks that we're dealing with here are Aiden O'Connell, Gardner Minshew, Zach Wilson, Jared Stidham, and Sam Darnold? Are these the quarterbacks that we're talking about here? Sam Darnold, Nick Mullins, Jaron Hall in Minnesota. I still feel like Minnesota is in the best spot. And then the Raiders, I don't love where they're at quarterback. Broncos, I don't love where they're at either. But so one of those teams, I would be inclined to trade up. Question is which one. I feel like the Raiders they're the furthest one back. They've got the closest thing to, like, a vet, I feel like, in Minshew. So maybe they trade up. The question is where. I don't know. I think if you're Arizona, like, they can tease that they could trade back. I think they should just take Rome here. If I were them, I would just take Rome. If I got the only offer I would take if I were Arizona, so there's a couple of teams here, Arizona and the Chargers. I'm both just taking weapons here. I'm taking Rome for Arizona, and then for the Chargers, I'm probably going to take Neighbors. Yeah, I mean, he would be the next player on my board here. So I'm going to take Neighbors for the Chargers. So that brings us to the Giants, and I went receiver. And now is where we're getting into trade territory. The Giants could very easily take a quarterback. They have such a difficult choice because their team sucks. Their team really sucks. Why not Marvin Harrison Jr. to the Cardinals? Because I had the Patriots taking Marvin Harrison Jr. at 3. If you're tuning in on TikTok, I'm live on the FanDuel, Twitch, and YouTube. We're doing a live mock draft. First overall pick was Caleb Williams. Second overall was Drake May. Third overall, I have not done any trades so far. Third overall was Marvin Harrison. Fourth was Roma Dunze. Fifth was Malik Neighbors. This is what I would do if I were each of these teams. If I'm the Giants at 6, and all 3 of Marvin, Rome, and Neighbors are off the board, I'm feeling very weary about what I want to do here. Because that's another team that, like, they could use some players. They have some needs, man. They got, Daniel Jones and Drew Lock as their quarterback options. You would like them to get another weapon. Darren Waller is, like, on the verge of medically retiring. But they've got some guys, too. They've got Dex. They got Banks last year, so maybe you don't want to get another corner. And I don't know if I would take a corner this high. My next highest prospects at this point would be Joe Alt, Brock Bowers, Latu, Newton, and Murphy. So here's what I'm going to do real quick. I'm going to pull up. What about the Bears? I had the Bears taking Caleb, and their next pick isn't until 9. What I'm deciding is whether or not I want to see the Bears or the Jets trade up here. Probably not the Bears, but the Jets I could absolutely talk myself into the Jets. I could absolutely talk myself into a Jets trade up. Minnesota could be at this point, but I think I'm still in the vein of just like take best player available, and maybe that's not what I should do. But because they traded for Burns, so you probably don't want to do anything defensively. You could do a tackle. You could do alt. But then what? You're probably moving him to the right tackle spot. I think Brock Bowers here is probably the right. Like, I know people don't want to see a tight end go this high. They've been very critical of that type of a play. I had the Patriots taking Marvin Harrison Jr. at 3. I keep going back and forth. I'm like, oh, well, do I want to make a trade? I know what I'm going to do at 7. I know what I'm going to do at 8. 9, that might be where I see a trade. That actually is probably exactly what I'm going to do. So I think here's the play. At 6, I'm going to take Brock Bowers to the Giants. They need a weapon. I know they also need a quarterback, but I don't love any of them enough to take one this high. And I would rather have just the better player, in my opinion. And I think Brock Bowers can do a lot for that offense. So I'm taking Brock Bowers at 6. At 7, obvious pick is Joe Alt. No question about it. At 8, I've seen projections for Dallas Turner. I've seen Arnold get mocked here a little bit, and some other corners. I'm going to take the next best player on my board, who's actually I would have taken higher as far as like best player available, but I'm going to take Leatu Latu. They haven't had a good pass rusher in like 8 years. They need one. They also need a corner, but I think Latu is a better player. Now, sitting here at 9 is the Bears. At this point, I could see a trade. If any of these three teams called, I would answer. Vikings would not have to give up 11 and 23. The Broncos would not have to give up. None of these teams would have to give up an absurd amount. The Raiders would probably have to give up the most. I'm still of the opinion that the Raiders are the most desperate to make that deal happen. So I think them moving up to 9 is very possible. So with that being said, who do I have them trading up with? Raiders, right? Am I tripping? Can I not read? Where's the Raiders? There it is. Raiders. They give up 13 and 77. Yeah, we'll do 13 and 77. And that'll probably go through. All right, so the Raiders on the clock. At this point, I'll have them take Daniels. That honestly might be the only other quarterback I take in the first round at all. I could see we might do Penix here at 23. We'll see. But that might be the only other quarterback we take. So the Raiders trade up for Daniels here. Now things get interesting. In the past, I've taken Cooper DeJean with this pick at 10. Because there's no big-time receiver left, I don't really know what I would do here. Because that's the only thing they would really need. I'm trying to read the chat here. Why would the Raiders be desperate to move to 9? Because the Broncos and Vikings sit ahead of them. I think if Daniels fell to 11, the Vikings would take him. And if the Vikings passed him, I think the Broncos would take him. So I think the Raiders are the most, desperate team in terms of, if they don't get up to 9 to get their guy, they're going to lose out on him. And I wouldn't be desperate enough to move up to, 3 just because the Vikings, getting up into the top 5, I think is too hard because the Vikings can beat you out in that trade battle. If they really wanted to, they could. But if I were the Vikings, I wouldn't do that. And if I would that is not a trade I'm willing to make. So then, but moving up to 9 from 13, I don't think that's a lot to give up to get Daniels at that point. If he was there at 13, I think they would take him anyway. But I don't think he would be there at 13. All right. So we got the Jets on the clock. The way we did this in the Stay Hot mock draft earlier was we took, I think we took Byron Murphy. I think that's who we took because that kind of felt like the type of guy they would pick. And people got mad at us because they're like, why do you guys always take defensive players? Well, in this case, look at the way the board's fallen. We've got Caleb Williams, Drake May, Marv, Rome, Malik, Brock, Alt, Latu, Daniels. I mean, all four of the big time weapons are gone. And not that there aren't other guys here that I would be interested in, but not at 10, I fear. Not at 10. My personal favorite of my probably we're at pick 10. Yeah, so I've got 2 of my top 10 players left on the board, both Byron Murphy and Johnny Newton. I would take Johnny Newton over him, and I think it would be a good fit. You think about how good this defensive line already is. The one weakness is probably Kinlaw. I think Johnny Newton can slide right in and be a really high level pass rusher for them. And if you have concerns about the run defense, I wouldn't worry about it so much because of how good the rest of the defensive line is. You can kind of just let him tee off a little bit. I think that could be a really good fit for them. So as much as people are going to hate it, that's what I'm going to do. All right. Jets should go offensive line. I would be interested in Powers Johnson at that pick. Or maybe if you wanted to go, there's a lot of good offensive lineman prospects. Fuaga, Fashanu. I never get those pronunciations right. It's Fashanu and Faltanu. But I always mix those up. Latham's in there, Mims, Barton. But at 10, that feels like a reach. That's also a pick that the Jets very well could make. And that's why earlier I was considering having the Jets trade up to get one of these receivers. It's something that I've entertained earlier because I really think there's a very good shot that all of these guys are gone. But people are so enthralled by the idea of quarterbacks populating the top 5 so heavily. And that could happen as well, but I would not want to risk that if I were the Jets. But coming out of here with Johnny Newton, still a top 10 player on my board, I would be very excited for it. And then I didn't have the Broncos taking a quarterback or trading up for a quarterback. We'll get to their pick in a second. I don't intend to have them taking a quarterback here. Let's get through the Vikings pick real quick. I'm not going to have them taking a QB, at least not at this pick. They have another pick, so I'm debating on whether or not I want to go Penix there. But I've got really 2 ideas here for the Vikings, and both of them are on defense. So I would either go Cooper, DeJean, or Byron Murphy, which I keep going back-to-back positions here, which is kind of lame. But I'm just trying to get best players available. That's kind of how I'm building this out. I think Cooper's really good. I think Byron's really good. I think Dallas Turner's very good. But I probably would go interior if I were Minnesota over edge, and I also just think Murphy's a better prospect than Turner. Nate Wiggins is another guy that's really good who I like. But I'm so confused. What is he talking about? Patriots need a QB and need to rebuild their entire... Yeah, I agree with you. They need a QB, but my concern with taking Jaden Daniels at 3, right? If that's what they wanted to do, is that Jaden Daniels played his best year of college behind the best offensive line in college football, throwing to the best wide receiver duo in college football. 2 guys where we had Malik Neighbors go number 5 overall. I think he's, absolutely going to go in the top 10 and could go in the top 5. And then you have Brian Thomas, who is who's also going to be a first round pick, though probably not as high. I see him probably going in the late teens, early 20s. He's a very good player as well. I won't probably take him there. I'll probably take him later in the first. I would take Leggett over him, but they're both very, very he played with 2 first-round pick wide receivers and the best offensive line in college football. And I think sending him to the Patriots where, let's be real, his situation would be objectively worse. I just don't think you can justify that. I'm doing this mock draft on the FanDuel YouTube and FanDuel Twitch. It's free to watch. It's just on YouTube. Just go to YouTube or Twitch and search FanDuel. It's also on my Twitter. I posted the link. I've heard from a few Vikings fans that they prefer keeping their picks and getting Penix with their say. That's what I keep saying that. I think there's such a good landing spot for a quarterback that if they were to take, a defensive player at 11 and then come around and get Penix at 23, I think that would be perfectly fine. Even though I don't love Penix, I think there's definitely things to be worried about with him. I think, coming in and throwing to Justin Jefferson and Hawkinson and Addison would be a really nice landing spot for him. But let's keep. Oh, I don't actually have the YouTube chat up. Let me make sure I'm reading the chat on YouTube as well. Okay. Okay. That's better. So my best player available at this point would be Byron Murphy. That's probably what I'm going to go with. I do love Cooper DeJean. He'll probably be a guy I take later as well. But at this point in time, I look at the way the boards fall, and Byron Murphy's here at 11. I think that's pretty good value. I think that fills a need for them. And then, we'll kind of see where things fall at 23. And if I don't have a particularly great BPA fit that I like, I'll probably end up taking Penix. But I will take Byron Murphy here for the Minnesota Vikings. I mean, you think about how many guys they've lost on their defensive line to Cleveland, especially. They need to bring some pieces back in. It's gonna suck for Miami though. It's gonna suck for Miami when we get to that pick. Oh, you know what I should have done? I should have had Miami trade up. To get Byron Murphy, and then Minnesota is sitting here with 21 and 23, and they could go. They could get a third receiver and Penix. I'm trying to think about who would even fall there at that point. All right, we're about to go on a pretty long run of. I'm not even sure what kind of a run we're about to go on. This is interesting. I could go because we're at Denver at this point. My initial thought with Denver was just to go edge. I feel like that's something that they're definitely. Okay, yeah, I'll scroll up so you guys can see the whole pick so far. So what I had so far was Caleb Williams 1. This is what I would do. Caleb Williams 1, Drake May 2, Marvin Harrison 3, Rome Odunze 4, Malik Neighbors 5, Brock Bowers 6, Joe Alt 7, Leatu Latu 8, Jaden Daniels 9, Johnny Newton 10, Byron Murphy 11. And now we're at the Denver Broncos. These guys need everything, man. They need a quarterback. They honestly could probably use some receivers, even though I like Sutton, and I know people are big fans of Tim Patrick, but the health of those receivers through the years is very low. The number of snaps that they play is not the number that you would like to see. I like Patrick Surtain a lot, so I'm not too worried about the corners, but you could always use more secondary help as well. But to me, and that's the thing. It's like, to me, the best player available at this point is probably Cooper. It's either Cooper or I'm also a big fan of Fuaga. I like Fuaga. I like Fashanu. And Faltanu. Yes, I always mess up those pronunciations. Without what you think will I don't think JJ's a first round guy at all. Like, I wouldn't pick JJ McCarthy in the first round. It's probably a controversial opinion at this point. I know a lot of people like him, but to me, he's not a first round. He's not a first round talent. This is tough for me. It really is. I like Cooper a lot. He is almost certainly my next best player available outside of and then there's some offensive linemen here, but I'm not going to take an offensive lineman for Denver. Those are almost certainly going to go like 1, 2, 3 to the Saints. No, probably not. I'd probably go Saints, Seattle, and then Bengals, Dolphins will probably go offensive line. So this is going to be... it's going to be a weird pick, but I do think Cooper DeJean is the best player available. And I think at 12, that's who I would take. If this is how the board fell, Cooper DeJean is such a versatile player that you can line him up anywhere, and this would make Pat Surtain's job really easy. You let Surtain kind of follow the number one, and then you can kind of do whatever you want with Cooper on either in the slot or on the backside, or if you want to do some invert cover two, or if you want to just do some quarters coverage, like you can do a lot with him. So I'm going to take Broncos and uniforms are getting too much hate. I agree. I meant to tweet this out earlier. Every uniform looks bad in that like three guys standing together. You guys know the picture where it's like the three guys standing side by side. That type of picture for uniforms never looks good. It never does. I've never seen uniforms look good when that picture is used. I'm not going to judge them until I see them on the field. That's how I feel. Until I see them on the field, I'm not going to judge them. All right, so we took Cooper DeJean at 12. I feel like that's going to be a pick that gets clowned, but it is what it is. Now we've got the Bears here at 13. They could definitely use some... They could probably use some help on their defensive line a little bit, but I don't know. They've put a lot of resources into it recently, so maybe you don't want to do that. I'm not going to try and do a whole lot with their offense right now. Though I could see... I don't know. I maybe that might be a bad thought process to be like, well, they've put effort into it before, so they shouldn't now. I still think Dallas Turner is probably the best fit here, I think. So at 13, I think that's pretty good value for him. I don't know if I would have him this high on my board, but he's definitely the next highest defensive line player, like edge or interior. And I feel like that's probably the biggest position I can fill at this point. And I would probably take him over the receivers that I have at this point left. So, with that being said, Dallas Turner to the Chicago Bears. And now we're going to take offensive line. This is pretty easy pick for me. We did this in the Stay Hot mock, mostly because we thought Fuaga kind of fit the mentality of the Saints. But I also just like Fuaga as a prospect. Just like the raw power, I think is really nice to have. So I'm going to take Fuaga here at 14. And then at 15, I think we're back into receiver territory. We could also take a corner. I think Wiggins would be a good fit here for Indianapolis. And I probably would have Wiggins above the other receivers at this point over Brian Thomas and over Leggett, who are my next two receivers that I'm going to end up taking off the board here. Why would you take Fuaga? Power, man. I have not picked for the Dolphins yet, but it's almost certainly going to be an offensive lineman just because I ended up already taking defensive lineman. I like DeJean to the Colts. Sadly, I already took DeJean. I already gave DeJean to the Broncos for the same reason. He's just so versatile. So at this point, the Colts, I would either take a corner or a receiver. Nate Wiggins is probably my next highest player on my board. So that's who I'm feeling like taking at this point. Arnold has not gone yet. Arnold has not gone yet. You prefer edge to the Broncos. I get that. I would not be opposed to it. I'm a little bit biased because I went to high school with Jonathan Cooper, so I want to see him ball out. But at the same time, yeah, I agree. Like Dallas Turner, I think would be a good fit for them. And if he's there at 12, which I think he very well could be, I would be very inclined to take him. I just have Cooper DeJean like graded higher as a prospect. He's over Wiggins? Nah, bro. I'm going to take Wiggins before I take Arnold. So at 15, I think that's what I'm going to do is I'm probably going to take Wiggins here. I think that'll be a good fit for them. I don't hate the receivers. I don't hate the receivers at all. And I feel like the secondary could use some more help than the receiving room could. Seattle, all right. Now we're at a point where we're back to the offensive line. All right. So now it's either Faltanu or Fashanu. Actually, yeah, those are probably the only two guys at this point. I'm curious as to what other people are thinking about here. I love Powers Johnson. I know he's falling on boards like more and more, but I think he is a really, really great prospect. You're from Cleveland? Love the Browns, man. We're going to the Super Bowl this year. I appreciate you supporting the page, man. It means a lot. We'll see where we're at 32, but we probably got to speed this along a little bit. Curious as to what other people would do at 16 though. Browns at the Super Bowl is bold. Someone has to say it, man. Someone has to say it. Why not me? So yeah, I'm thinking about Fashanu or Faltanu or Powers Johnson. This is kind of the vibe that I'm getting at this point. First round exits. Don't be like that, man. Don't be like that. No. Yeah, this is the thing is like I'm trying to think about like if I want to go like versatility or just like who's the better player, because I like who the Seahawks have at their tackles. I like Abe Lucas and I like Lucas and Cross a lot actually, when they're healthy, of course. I think those guys are very good players. I think Faltanu is probably more versatile, though. And so you probably want him because he could probably slot inside and play some guard for you. So that's who I'm going to take at this point. I think I'll slide back up so we can go over the other picks at this point. We're halfway through the first round. So we'll take Faltanu at 16. Pick number 1 was Caleb Williams. Then we went Drake May to Washington. Patriots took Marvin Harrison. I had the Cardinals take Roma Dunze. The Chargers take Malik Neighbors. The Giants take Brock Bowers. The Titans take Joe Alt. The Falcons take Laiatu Latu. I had at 9 the Raiders trade up with the Bears to take Jaden Daniels from 13. At 10, I had the Jets taking Johnny Newton. Keep in mind, none of the big weapons were there. I considered having them trade up, but I just couldn't give myself a deal that made sense for me, if that makes sense. It doesn't, but whatever. At 11, I had the Vikings taking Byron Murphy. 12, I had the Broncos taking Cooper DeJean. 13, I had the Bears, who again traded back from 9 with the Raiders. I had them taking Dallas Turner. At 14, I had the Saints taking Fuaga. At 15, I had the Colts taking Wiggins. And then the last pick we just did was 16. Seattle, I had them taking Faltanu. So, I see a lot of people saying that they want the Patriots to take Daniels at 3. I think that is not only a reach, but just a bad fit as well. But we're here with the Jaguars, and I think this pretty easily has to be corner. And it's tricky because I think there are definitely other players here that you might want, but I think their biggest need to me is probably at corner. That's what we did in the Stay Hot mock earlier, is kind of what we thought they would do, but it's also something that they probably should do. It's either that or somewhere on the offensive line. Fashanu is probably the best player available here, and that might be what I take. People are saying Quinion Mitchell in the chat. I would not take Mitchell. I would take, if I'm going to take a corner here, I would take Kool-Aid. But I'm really considering Fashanu as well. I look handsome today. Thank you, man. Means a lot. Yeah, so it's tough. I think I'm gonna go corner, but it's not an easy choice. And I think about the struggles that they have on their offensive line, and you really want to make Trevor Lawrence's job as easy as you can. But at the same time, that goes for the defense as well. Like, if your defense sucks, you're also doing a bad job for. Could they go Powers Johnson? They could. I'm a big fan of Powers Johnson. I think he's a great player. I think he could go for a lot of places. I don't think it would be a bad landing spot for Jacksonville. I wonder where he's getting mocked a lot of places right now. I'm wondering. I'm trying to find. There we go. Let's see. Powers Johnson. Common mock spot for him has been San Francisco, it seems. Interesting. Mims is really good. You got to have concerns for health with Mims. So I'd be very cautious picking Mims, and that's probably the same thing with Powers Johnson too, is like, those guys are amazing, but you have to be a little bit cautious picking them. And that's why I think, you see guys like that end up, a lot of times at San Francisco or maybe Baltimore, or like teams where it's not necessarily like do or die. Like, if this guy doesn't work out, you're fucked. And that's why I'm leaning away from the offensive line here for Jacksonville. Even like Fashanu would probably be a great pick for them as well. To me, I feel like Kool-Aid is probably just the safe play here. So I'm going to take Kool-Aid. They need a corner. He's a good one to me. He's my next best guy. This is an easy pick at this point. Is probably Fashanu at 18 to the Bengals. I don't really have to think about this one at all. This one is kind of a tricky pick for me. My instincts have always been to take Jared Verse here. That's kind of always been where my head is at, because you want to replace Aaron Donald, and they're not really going to have any power on their defensive line with him gone. But I think at the same time they should rely on the success of their young guys they drafted last year. Kobe Turner and Byron Young. Both of those guys had really great rookie seasons. It's tough. You could definitely justify going offensive line here for them. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like you could go offensive line. I think you could go Jared Verse here. I think the Rams have a lot that they could do. You could go corner. I still have Arnold on the board here. Like there's a lot that I could do. So I'm just trying to think about like what is their biggest need? What are they going to struggle the most with if they don't get right now? And I feel like defensive line is not that. I think if they went another round, I think if they were to go this round without taking a defensive lineman, they would be okay. And I don't know if I can say the same for offensive line, but I do think that Arnold would be the best player available here. I also don't know if I necessarily agree that I feel like a left tackle is probably the biggest need, or just like anywhere on the offensive line, really. But that's kind of where I'm thinking is like offensive line is probably the biggest need for them. Rams don't need O-line. They're stacked. I don't know if I would say they're stacked. I don't know. I'm gonna go best player available here. Terrion Arnold to me is the next best corner. I've kind of gone on a pretty tall run on corners. Went Cooper at 12, Wiggins at 15, Kool-Aid at 17, and now this will be Arnold at 19. But I think it works out. I think it works out pretty well. That's what I'm going to do. Sorry. Draft night trade's about to go crazy. That's the thing is like, I am a big advocate for like, if there's something you really want to do, move up for it. But otherwise, just kind of sit and make your picks. Get your guy. So that's what you don't see me make a lot of trades. I made one because I was thinking like the Raiders could really be screwed here if there's two teams that could very easily take a quarterback ahead of them. So I was like, I'll have the Raiders move up, and I thought that was a fine play for the Bears to take to move back. Here with the Steelers, though, this might be this to me feels like an offensive line pick. I'm thinking maybe Powers Johnson. Here. I don't know. That's a tricky one. That is a tricky one. I'm almost. How many? Hold on, I gotta look this up now. Who is their center? How many centers do they have on the team? Lineup. No, roster. Steelers depth chart. Hold on. this almost certainly has to be the Steelers because I'm like very confident that they don't have that they might not have a center on their roster. Because they have a center, but it looks like they. So we've got two different sources here. Okay, so that's why it's like not sure as to like who their center is because they've got a guy that's listed as a guard in some spots, but a center elsewhere. That's weird. But anyway, the Steelers go Adonai. The Steelers go receiver could make a lot of sense here. Their offensive line does suck though, bro. And especially you think about who their quarterbacks are, Russell Wilson and Justin Fields. Yes, they're mobile, but Justin Fields doesn't handle pressure particularly well. Russell Wilson isn't quite the magician that he used to be. I would be very inclined to go. I would be very inclined to go offensive line here, which I don't know, man. That is interesting. Taking a receiver would be. Could go Frazier in round 2. I'm trying to think. Where do the Steelers? They'll pick at 51. Frazier is good too. That's not a bad thing. I'm almost wondering like if he's like billed too high though. You might have to trade up. Is what I'm like if you wanted to get Frazier in round 2, you might have to trade up because he's probably going to be one of the top guys to me. But I see what you're saying. Like there's probably, but you could argue there's probably receivers available in round 2, and the Steelers are notoriously good at picking round 2, like day 2 wide receivers. They're very good at it. So I'm gonna go Powers Johnson here with that in mind. I'm gonna get crushed for this one. I really am. As far as receivers go, Brian Thomas is up there. I like him a lot. Him and Leggett are my next 2 receivers that I would take. All right. So now we're here with the Miami Dolphins. We got to wrap this up. Let's go. My 5 guys got picked up. We're cooking. We're cooking. We're cooking with grease. All right, so yes, Miami. Miami is the next team that we're looking at. I haven't had 5 guys in so long, bro. One thing they don't need receivers, right? Well, no, I mean they've got Tyreek and Waddle. A third guy could be cool, but their biggest needs are definitely along the offensive line, probably along the defensive line, though. At this point, I don't know if there's a guy that I really like for them. Because I don't think you can like slide verse inside, and there isn't really another interior guy that I'm in love with at this point. I did get the bacon burger. Yes, sir. I got the bacon burger. Not the like double stack. I just got like the bacon cheeseburger. But Fisk to the Dolphins would be criminal. Nah, I would. Nah, there's no way. There's no way. Yeah, baby, it's Cavs hours. I'm gonna be watching the Cavs tonight. It'll be the first NBA game I've watched in 2024. Is Cavs Magic, and not even game 1. Yeah, I'm thinking Mims here. I like Guyton too. I'm thinking Mims here. I think if you're, this is kind of where this was, again, my thought with Mims was you've got the injury concerns because he's so big and so explosive, but if you can go to a team where it's like that's not necessarily do or die for them, it's probably okay. And I think the Dolphins could be that, where if he does work out for them, it would be great. But if not, it's not going to be a whole lot different than it was before. It's not like, I don't know. Maybe that's bad logic. But I like Mims here to the Dolphins. I will take that, absolutely. All right, Philadelphia. They could use a corner. And not even, oh, this might be the perfect landing spot for Mitchell, too. Okay, because why am I so high on Leggett? Because he's big as shit and catches everything. And you think like, oh, you're joking. I'm so dead serious. Like that's the number one thing that I've started looking for in receivers is just like, who is the best at making the tough catch? And Leggett is like that. That's why I prefer Rome over Neighbors. It's the hardest skill set to teach. It's actually not even, it is the only skill set that you probably aren't just going to learn. You can become a better route runner. You can, learn more, a wider variety of routes. Like there's the skill of playing wide receiver in terms of getting open is a lot of scheme, and it's a lot of stuff that you can teach. But as far as just, having the skill and the coordination to high point of football, it's not something that comes just like later into your NFL career. It's a lot of times you either have it or you don't, right? But we're with the Eagles here. This might be a good landing spot for Quinion Mitchell. It really might, because they could use a corner. But they still have like Darius Slay right now and Bradbury. And in theory, if Mitchell is good enough to start right away, like that, my only concern with Mitchell is that he is honestly more raw than he's been given credit for. The only issue that I have with Mitchell is that I think he's a little bit more raw than he's been given credit for. And because he played at Toledo, and I thought he was very aggressive and trying to bite on routes early. He anticipates, but he doesn't necessarily react. Like Cooper DeJean reacts to things really well. Quinion Mitchell anticipates, and sometimes he's right and it's a big play, but sometimes he's wrong and he gives up a big play, or almost gives up a big play. And you might be able to get away with that kind of stuff at Toledo, but in the NFL, you're probably not. And I wonder if he could learn from someone like Darius Slay, and if he's good enough to start over Bradbury right away, that could work out. But if not, then you're probably okay with like letting him just kind of sit and learn, and maybe you can play him in the slot, and maybe you can, let him just kind of free roam a little bit. But this was also the mentality that I had when Washington drafted Emmanuel Forbes last year. I was like, I don't love that pick, but maybe it could work out. I love Nate Wiggins. He's super athletic, very fluid, great man coverage guy. His technicality in man coverage is great, and he's a fantastic athlete, so it's hard to just like beat him with pure speed. So I'm thinking either Quinion Mitchell, or if you wanted them to get like a third receiver, which I guess they could, but they probably don't need, or maybe offensive line. Maybe that's another team that could go O-line. I wouldn't hate that at all. I don't know. I feel like there's a fair number of options for the Eagles. The most common mock that I've seen is usually corner. And I think a lot of people usually have Cooper falling this far, but I'll take Mitchell. I will. I think he's a good player. I do just have some worries about his ability in his ability to pick between reacting and anticipating. But I think that could be a good landing spot for him. All right, at this point, I'll bite the bullet a little bit and let Minnesota get a quarterback, even though he's not like anywhere within like my top 30 prospects at this point. Michael Penix is probably the best option, and so that's who I'm going to rock with. Is Michael Penix to Minnesota. Dallas, I'm going to have take a receiver, I think. Okay, I'm trying to think. I hate that I'm even like considering planning things out in this capacity. If I went receiver, there's like 1, 2, 3 teams that I could go receiver for. I definitely could. Oh, I love Leggett. I love Leggett. I love Leggett. All right. Cowboys, do I want them to take a receiver here? Do I? I feel like yes. Like, yeah, they have Brandon Cooks, but I think their corners are good. I think they've got good pass rushers. The offensive line could use some work, and I'm wondering if maybe Latham, but Latham's really young. Latham's really young. Barton could move inside, which could probably help them. A linebacker in round 1. They honestly, bro, they probably should, dog. Like, they could use a linebacker. But I'm going to take who my best receiver available is at this point. Who is... Damn, why does PFF hate him? I'm going to take... shit, that might not be a good fit. Don't care. We're taking Xavier Leggett. Green Bay. All right. I think in the past, Theo's had them going offensive line at this point. And Barton's the most versatile guy for them. Latham's young, and at some point I'll probably have him go, but we'll do Graham Barton here, and then Tampa. Tampa's another tricky one, man. They could honestly use another weapon. Mike Evans and Godwin aren't getting any younger. Maybe they could use an offensive lineman. Or actually, no, this is easy. This is super easy. This is where Verse goes. Super easy. I don't know why I didn't. Yeah, I don't know why I just like completely forgot that Verse was still on the board. Because normally I have Verse going to the Rams, but I decided to take Arnold here. I completely forgot Verse was there, and I was like, that's kind of a tough choice. Yeah, no, we're taking Jared Verse there pretty easily. Now at 27, things get a little bit tricky for Arizona. Do you double up at receiver here? JJ Redick interviewing to be the Hornets head coach? Nah, I gotta tell him that. That's crazy. That's completely insane. Oh my God. I can't even believe that. trying to think about what I want. So we got Marvin earlier. They could double up a receiver, but maybe they don't necessarily need to. Probably want to go defense here. You could go edge. I don't think that would necessarily be a terrible idea. Like Chop Robinson could be a good player for you. We're not taking Fisk. There's no one on like the defensive line that I would like. But if you did like edge or corner, I know some people like TJ Tampa. Lassiter's cool. But Chop would probably be the highest player on my board here. So I think that's who I'll go with. Bills, pretty easy. I'm taking Brian Thomas. Lions. Oh my God. It's NFL TikToker and Browns fan Blaiden Kirk. Lions. What do I want the Lions to do? Couldn't hurt to get another edge rusher, but I don't know if there's anyone else that I would take in the first round here. Broswell's interesting. Actually, there's a few guys that I would be relatively interested in. They did get. Maybe you don't want to invest too much in. They probably need. Okay, no, their biggest need is corner, absolutely, and this is a team where I would have definitely considered trading up for corner. Their biggest need is definitely corner. And at this point, Lassiter's good. He's a good athlete for sure. I know people like the Michigan guy a decent amount, but he's going to be like 24 by the time the season starts. And I guess like good is good. And he was a receiver before, so he's got the like natural ball skills. That's the thing. Yeah, you're right. You're right, Dom. The Lions have a lot of needs for a team drafting this late. The thing is like they don't have like a super explosive dynamic wide receiver. Like I love the Sun God. I love Amon-Ra. And there's definitely some benefits that they have with some of the other guys. But they don't have like someone to take the top off of a defense, you know? I'd be really interested in taking a receiver, especially if the corners are kind of falling like this. Like in this world where we get to a point where Mitchell is even gone, like that early, I would be very interested in taking one of the receivers. I would be very interested in it. Keon Coleman would be freakish for them. I would have him over pretty much everyone else left. I would go Keon. I'd consider Adonai. Here's the thing, though. I'm going to keep it a stack with you. I don't think the Lions would pick Mitchell. I feel like the rumors of his effort concerns would shy them away from him. He just like, I don't know if he would fit their culture. Keep it a stack. Keon Coleman, on the other hand, I like him. So actually, you know what? It feels wrong, but I'm going to take Keon here. And then the Ravens. I don't think I would have them taking a receiver. I think in previous months I've had quite a few teams taking Chop Robinson at this point. But they got away with like decent play at their defensive line. I mean, they were really good up front last year, just because of their blitz packages. But I would definitely, I would consider offensive line for them. right? Maybe not Frazier. But Latham has fallen pretty far. And I feel like he's definitely, a young guy, 21, huge. The thing is, like, he's like very clearly a tackle. And I just don't know if that's a good fit for you. So maybe the answer is someone like, I don't know, maybe the answer is someone that could like fold more inside. Definitely not Guyton. So maybe the answer is Frazier, but like they have Linderbaum, right? And so like unless you're gonna bounce Frazier to guard, which I guess he could. Adonai's still on the board here. Maybe that would be the pick for Baltimore there. But like a huge run on receivers this late, I don't know, man. But that would be a great pickup for them. Oh, okay. No, here's what I'm gonna get. I'm trying to think like who's like the guy I like the most. Just someone that I'm like super interested in. I feel like there isn't anyone that I'm like super enthralled with for the first round. They're going to end up with someone that I like. They always do. But Adonai, I don't think would be a terrible pick here for them. It's just kind of a weird run of things because of the way the board's fallen for me. And the board never falls this clean. It never does. So here's what we'll do. I'll take Mitchell to Baltimore. I'm going to take Latham to the 49ers. And then with Kansas City, I'm going to have them take a receiver also. My next guy would be Ladd. Yeah, so that's who we're going to take. Ladd McConkey at 32. And then we're going to ignore pick 33. Just don't let Matt see that. But that's the mock draft. Caleb Williams went number 1 overall. Drake May, number 2 to Washington. Marvin Harrison Jr., number 3 to the Patriots. I did consider trading back, but I didn't have a team that I wanted to trade up. Rome Odunze to the Cardinals at 4. Malik Neighbors at 5 to the Chargers. Brock Bowers at 6 to the Giants. Joe Alt at 7 to the Titans. Leatu Latu at 8 to the Falcons. Jaden Daniels, 9 to the Raiders. I had them trade up with the Bears. Johnny Newton at 10 to the Jets. Byron Murphy at 11 to the Vikings. 12 was Cooper DeJean to the Broncos. 13, remember the Bears traded down. They got Dallas Turner. Fuaga went at 14 to the Saints. Nate Wiggins at 15 to the Colts. Fautanu. I always get the pronunciations wrong. Went at 16 to the Seahawks. Kool-Aid went at 17 to the Jags. Fashanu went at 18 to the Bengals. Arnold went at 19 to the Rams. Powers Johnson at 20 to the Steelers. Mims at 21 to the Dolphins. Quinyon Mitchell at 22 to the Eagles. Michael Penix at 23 to the Vikings. Xavier Legette at 24 to the Cowboys. Graham Barton at 25 to the Packers. Jared Verse at 26 to the Buccaneers. Chop Robinson right after him at 27 to the Cardinals. 28 is Brian Thomas Jr. to the Buffalo Bills. Keon Coleman, 29 to the Detroit Lions. 30 is Adonai Mitchell to the Ravens. 31 is J.C. Latham to the 49ers. And 32 is Ladd McConkey to the Kansas City Chiefs. So, yeah, Blaiden hates Matt. Yeah, I fear that. I guess that's the truth, isn't it? But thank you all so much for tuning in. This is just for the people watching on the FanDuel page. Thank you all so much for tuning into this mock draft. It was a ton of fun. Things fell very weird, as they always do, but I appreciate you all tuning in, and until next time, I will catch you on the Flippity Flop. Get excited for the draft. It's only in a few days. Should be a ton of fun. I'm stoked. You know, and if you haven't seen my top 10 big board, it's on Twitter, and we'll post it again on like TikTok and Instagram, probably on draft